Welcome, I'm Vanessa Tyler. You're watching SarderTV, where the world's innovators tell us the path to business success. Well, the clear path is to stay on top of technology, and no one knows that better than Maciej Kranz from the world leader Cisco Systems. He traveled all the way from Silicon Valley to be here in our New York studios. Maciej, thank you for joining us. What is the Internet of Things? What does that mean?
In a nutshell, Internet of Things is about everything getting connected to everything. So devices, machines, things getting connected to each other, to the network, sometimes to the Internet. If you look at the last 25 years of Internet, the main purpose of connected devices was to give you and I, give us access to each other, access to the data, access to the online processes. With Internet of Things, the purpose of these connected devices is different. Is to generate the data, and then we can use the data to create the business outcomes.
What is the biggest misconception about IoT?
There are plenty of them, but probably the biggest one is around IoT happening in the consumer space and in a home. And even though I do see some value of connecting your fridge or your washer and dryer to internet, the use cases that drive the need to interconnect these different classes of devices in a home are just starting to emerge. Elderly care is one example, home security another. This is a misconception. The reality is that Internet of Things is actually happening big time in the business, in manufacturing, in transportation, in smart cities, and many other industries.
What should investors know about which industries will grow most and first from IoT transformation?
Great question. I would say in manufacturing, manufacturing is actually fairly mature in terms of some of the Internet of Things use cases, like connected operations or remote operations, or even preventive maintenance. Then transportation for the same reason. So overall, the industrial segment is interesting, one of the early adopters of Internet of Things. But we also are starting to see IoT being tested and piloted in healthcare, in retail, and even agriculture.
What types of companies or industries are most at risk for disruption by IoT?
And I would look at IoT is not just a technology shift, it's also a business structure change. From sort of a 20th century of doing business when there was one company, let's say, developing the entire station or entire auto rig, using often proprietary technologies, into this world of open systems, open standards, and multiple companies collaborating on a given solution. And some of the companies, I think, will make this transition, but some of them probably will not. So I would watch out for which companies and how quickly go to this new model.
Why are some companies not investing in IoT?
You know, I actually talked to a lot of customers and a lot of companies, and many of them have been investing in IoT, but many of them are confused by hype. You mentioned sort of misconception around connected home. So they're having a hard time translating this, all this messaging about the glorious future of IoT with billions of devices and trillions of revenues into what it actually means for them. So I think that the industry is sort of starting to change their course now and focusing more on what IoT means for you. How can we help you start implementing IoT today?
Manufacturing certainly jumped on it first. Why?
It's an interesting case because if you look at the first wave of Internet, it's fair to say that manufacturing was, as a sector, was not embracing these new technologies, Internet-driven technologies, as much as some other sectors. At the same time, when you think about manufacturing, they care about top line, they care about quality, they care about cost. And it's sort of like a match made in heaven because some of the use cases that IoT is so good at solving actually fit right in with these types of problems, to reduce costs, to increase uptime, to improve the quality of the product.
And as a result, manufacturing is one of the first industries to reap huge benefits from IoT. And what will be the impact of this?
You know, I would give you a couple of examples. So, for example, Harley-Davidson. It's actually a great example. Before implementing IoT, it used to take them 18 months from the time they actually took an order for a custom bicycle to the time they would actually ship a bike. With IoT, by connecting all of their operations and optimizing them, they reduced this time from 18 months to to 2 weeks. Huge change. And this is just the beginning.
And what advice would you give small or mid-sized businesses who are just beginning to explore IoT implementation?
I would tell them the time is right. Even a couple of years ago, maybe IoT was not ready to be implemented by small and medium businesses. But now the maturity of solutions is there. The ecosystem of partners and integrators is there. So I would give them advice around think big, but start small. Start with a small project. Look at some of the use cases your peers have implemented. And then probably the most important, find the right integrator. Somebody who has experience with implementation of IoT, but also experience in your area and in your market segment. And then just get started.
Where will the industry be 15 years from now? And how should business leaders differentiate between what IoT technologies are now versus what they will be later?
You know, I don't know if I have a crystal ball, but I can tell you some of the early signs of where we're going. We're definitely seeing the industries merging. For example, technology and transportation industry, technology manufacturing, even manufacturing and retail. So there's a convergence of industries. New industries are being formed, like drones, for example. New value propositions and new business opportunities are being created, like, for example, mass customization, mass personalization. As well as new business models. We're moving from a product to sort of a service business model. So I can't tell exactly what the future will look like, but it will definitely be very different.
You gave a great example, Harley-Davidson. What are a few of the better known companies that have pioneered IoT technology with very positive results?
On the user side, in addition to Harley, we've seen Pepsi, we've seen Ford, we saw Rio Tinto. So a fairly broad spectrum of companies implementing IoT. On the vendor side, both on the technology, in the technology sector, pretty much most of the vendors have IoT initiatives. Obviously, my employer Cisco, but also Microsoft, Dell, Intel, SAP, and others. But also on the vertical side, you see companies like GE, Rockwell, Honeywell, Emerson. So a lot of companies are starting to work together in driving IoT in the marketplace.
How could IoT solve some of the logistics and shipping challenges presented by the crush of e-commerce business on busy Cyber Monday?
If you look at Cyber Monday, with IoT, we can now ship more packages, we can deliver them faster, and they can arrive at your doorstep at the optimal condition. You already have seen the retailers or logistics companies sort of optimizing their operations by connecting all the processes. For example, in warehousing, by using connected robots as well as RFID tags, you actually can pick the products and ship them faster. Using preventive maintenance, you make sure that the delivery vehicle actually doesn't get stuck in the middle of the delivery, so you will get your package on time. By using sensors like temperature sensors or humidity sensors, if, for example, if you send perishables or food, you will actually get these products and you know that they will be in optimal condition.
You even mentioned at one point the weather, factoring the weather into all of this.
Exactly right. And for example, if you look at delivery, you can factor multiple factors. Weather, you can factor traffic, you can factor the destinations of the packages. So all of this data can be put in to optimize the schedules of the delivery vehicles.
You say there's a fundamental disconnect between OT and IT. How do you suggest people reinvent their understanding of each moving forward?
Yes, and just looking at the definition, so IT, obviously, these are the organizations that have been traditionally buying technology in the large enterprises, and operational technology are folks that have been operating plants or logistics systems. And I sort of laughed at they used to operate as if they were on different planets, but now, because if you look at the use cases like connected operations or preventive maintenance, they require the data to flow from the plant to the enterprise to the cloud. So there is a natural tendency for these teams to converge and start working together at the technology, architectural, as well as organizational level.
How have IoT security measures evolved in recent years? And what is still needed on that front? Very important.
Yeah, and it's a very timely topic. And I think we've seen actually a huge evolution over the last few years. For example, in the industrial sector, from, I would say, denial or security by obscurity, I will not connect my plant to outside world, to sort of a panic, to now implementing policy-based end-to-end architectures. So even though more needs to be done, I think both from the vendor perspective and from the user perspective, we have seen a lot of progress.
How are you seeing IoT affecting roles in the modern workplace?
As with every transition, we see some jobs disappearing, but many new jobs are being created. For example, in manufacturing in US alone, there are tens of thousands of jobs that don't get filled because the employers can't find people with the right skills. So what I see is that leading IoT companies do two things. One is they invest more internally, they invest in their workers. And secondly, they're getting more creative in how they find the right people. You know, it used to take us 10 or 20 years basically being in the same job and doing pretty much the same thing. Now we need to move into the model of continuous learning, continually evolving our jobs. So the smart companies not only invest in technology, but they also invest in people.
Why do you call IoT revolutionary economic opportunity?
I think I am biased because I am a big believer in IoT, and I actually believe that Internet of Things will actually have a greater impact on how we conduct our business, our jobs, and our lives than the original Internet had over the last 25 years. And we've seen the example of Harley, and there are many more examples of companies that can transform their businesses using IoT. So the best is yet to come.
How and why are B2B innovations driving the transition to IoT?
It's a combination of technology, but it's also the combination of need. And what I'm seeing is this shift from sort of a technology out approach into us really understanding and working closely with customers on understanding their problems and then designing the solutions that fit their requirements. So it's a nice change where we used to just be the customer and the vendor. Now we all collaborating on developing the right solutions.
Which first changes will consumers experience from the IoT revolution, and which might be a long way off?
Consumers can already benefit from logistics. They can benefit from better experience in retail stores where they can combine online experience and in-person experience. They can experience it in healthcare with better healthcare and better information that the doctors can have at their fingertips. Again, and again, I'm probably biased, but I would expect connected home to take a while.
What explains today's gap between the huge hype around IoT and the far less expansive implementation of the technology?
I would say, you know, when we started talking about IoT a couple of years ago, all of us, including myself, we were so excited about IoT that we talked about this big future and using big numbers and throwing in these great scenarios. And I think in some way, as I mentioned earlier, I think we confused a lot of customers and a lot of potential users. So there has been definitely the mismatch, which happens quite often, with the promise of technology versus what we can do today. So what I have been trying to do over the last year or two is to help redirect our focus on let's help customers implement IoT today versus only painting the beautiful picture of the future.
What are some of the pervasive problems we've seen increasingly that could get addressed soon by IoT technology?
I think there are many, and we've talked about the sort of business problems, but I also see IoT being implemented, for example, around environment and climate change. There are projects that are using IoT for early detection around tsunamis or earthquakes or floods. IoT is being used in agriculture for precision agriculture or more efficient, effective use of water, especially for water-intensive crops. So it's fascinating to see IoT being used not only in a business environment, but also to help us deal with climate change, and also, let's say, in smart cities to make our cities smarter, that are better places for us to be as businesses and as consumers.
With the advent of IoT, how are manufacturers today rethinking product development?
I would say that it allows us to be much more collaborative versus a traditional model, where it used to be that us as vendors would develop a technology based on the feedback from customers, and then we sort of go to customers and try to sell this product or this solution to them. Now we're much more in a collaborative mode where we would, an interactive mode, where we would go in, look at the problems that customers try to solve them together, not in a custom way, but in a way that we can solve it for the broader industry. So basically all of us are creators, all of us are consumers, and we all have the role to play in this innovative ecosystem.
How do organizations prepare to implement their new product development strategy based on IoT?
The first I would usually see is invest in your people and invest in your capabilities, and that you have people that can actually participate in this new wave. The second one is sort of think about your business being in a constant state of transformation. So it's not that we're sort of operating as a business and then maybe in 5 years we will transform somewhere else. It's this new mindset of change is constant and adjusting processes, expectations, and also KPIs and compensation structures around the process.
Yeah, every 5 to 7 years you should be changing?
And that's sort of what I've observed traditionally in the technology industry, that every 5 to 7 years we had to reinvent ourselves as employees, but also as businesses and industries. And especially in more traditional industries like manufacturing, like transportation, we've seen that they used to operate sometimes for decades with very little change. Now with this convergence of technology and new business models, they are also sort of adjusting to this new term. So you're right, every 3 to 7 years, whatever industry you are in, you'd better be able to reinvent yourself, or at least learn and progress in what you think about your job and your business.
Can you elaborate on the product design framework at the review stage?
It's an interesting topic. And again, it comes back to the concept of sort of the 20th century way of doing things and the 21st way of doing things. We used to do things in a very linear fashion, right? So getting input, developing product, getting input, finalizing the product. Now it's much, much more interactive, where you develop a prototype together between a user and the producer, and then you start iterating on this process. And I believe that for IoT to be successful, we all need to embrace that new model.
What are the steps involved in evaluating the technology needed to implement these product development changes?
I would say that we need to come at this from very different angles. And again, sort of taking often non-traditional approaches. So it's not sufficient to just go and do a survey. The best way to do it is to immerse yourself in a customer problem, which is why it's so important. I know I keep coming back to this topic, but it's so important that we understand the customer environment, not only from a technology perspective, but also from the business perspective, and go deep into the use case. That's usually the best way to get started.
Embedded processing is core to IoT product development. Can you please explain what is an embedded system?
So embedded system, or probably more broadly, we have this concept of a fog computing. It's basically the way for us to process the data as close to the source of the data. So traditionally, when you think about sort of the cloud models, where there is a source of the data, a device, we would send this data coming from this device to the cloud for processing. With embedded systems and fog computing, we are actually taking a cloud capability as close to the source as possible. And that way, we allow for IoT systems to scale, to operate much more real time, and thus provide new value propositions to the customers.
And what are the key components of that embedded system?
Of course, there's a hardware. Of course, there is a middleware. But the key here is the real-time processing engines that allow us to process the data as soon as it comes out.
How does real-time visibility with IoT applications help improve operational efficiency?
Let me give you an example of let's say a wind farm. It is actually sort of a live organism of multiple wind turbines. And in this case, we're getting some historical information about weather, about wind, about sort of the power requirements, but also real-time data coming from multiple sources. And this sort of a smart, intelligent system is interpreting both historical data and real-time data for real-time decision making. So in this case, they can make a decision when to turn on the turbine, which direction to turn it on, even before the wind comes.
With better data analysis due to IoT, what are the ways to better inventory management?
It's another great example. And if you look at sort of the warehousing systems, a combination of connected robots, a combination of different tagging schemes like RFID allow us to process many more products and objects than before, and also to find them faster. So you basically get much more sort of in and much more out of the system.
How does all of this get passed to the customer as a fast and efficient customer service?
Yes, a great question as well. I will give you two examples. One is around remote operations. So for example, what used to take a physical person to go to a device, whether it's a fridge or a piece of equipment on the factory floor, to actually look at the device, to diagnose it or repair it. With Internet of Things, you can do this remotely. So you don't have to send somebody over, and you can do it faster and cheaper. The second example I mentioned already, which is preventive maintenance. We can now, with these systems, a combination of artificial intelligence and IoT, we can now identify problems before they occur. So whether this is a robot on the manufacturing floor or a delivery vehicle, we can identify weeks and sometimes even months in advance that one of the elements in the engine will break down. We can take this vehicle to the shop, fix it, so that the vehicle doesn't get stuck in the middle of delivery.
How can organizations plan in advance to bridge IoT-related skills gap?
And it's a really essential topic because your IoT implementation will not be successful if you focus only on technology and not bring along your people, that they can take advantage of this technology, but they can also invent using this technology. So bottom line is you have to invest in your workforce and change the mindset that you will have to continuously evolve your skill sets. So sort of think about the pace of technology, how every couple of years we invent sort of the new ways of using technology. The same needs to happen with us. We have to continue to reinvent ourselves and continue to evolve our skills. So it's a different contract between an employer and employee now. It's not, I'm hiring you to do this job. It is, I'm hiring you to do this job and I want you to continue to learn and evolve this job.
Excellent. Very, very well done. Thank you so much. Very enlightening.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I'm Vanessa Tyler. Join us next time on SarderTV, where innovative thought thrives.